Hello, I am the nerdy Chaplain, and this is a sermon from the archives. It's entitled Things, Things, and More Things. It is based on the Gospel of Luke, chapter 12, verses 13 to 21, and Ecclesiastes, chapter 1, verses 2, then 12 through 14, and chapter 2, verses 18 through 23. It was originally offered on the 11th Sunday after Pentecost 2016 at a Congregational Church in Connecticut. Today's Old Testament reading comes from the book of Ecclesiastes, which is from the middle section of the Jewish Bible called the Writings or Wisdom books. The other two sections are familiar to us, the law and the prophets, as Jesus invokes them frequently in the Gospels. Only once in all of the Gospels does Jesus invoke this section. This is also a section of the Bible where there is disagreement over which books should be considered scripture. As Protestants, we follow what the rabbis decided. We felt that the rabbis knew what they were doing about the Jewish portion of the Bible. Other branches of Christianity include other books, which on their own are good and edifying, as Martin Luther would put it, but we do not consider them to be at the level of Scripture. Least known of these books is the Song of Songs, a collection of romantic poetry. There is the Book of Job, a poem addressing why the righteous suffer, and then a sequence of 3 books offering wisdom from 3 ages of life. Psalms, written by King David in his youth, Proverbs, written by King Solomon in midlife, and lastly Ecclesiastes, written by King Solomon as an old man. This section has had a lot of influence in culture throughout history, inspiring music, operas, movies, and literature, especially Ecclesiastes, influencing the work of Abraham Lincoln, Tom Wolfe, Leo Tolstoy, Shakespeare, Pete Seeger, and more. The word Ecclesiastes is a Latin translation of the Greek word translated for the Hebrew title of the book, Qohelet, which means teacher or preacher. The theme of this book, offering wisdom from the point of view of Solomon near the end of his life, can seem a bit depressing. Qohelet is speaking about the meaning of life, the best way to live one's life, and how all actions are inherently futile. As both the wise and the fool end in death, but wisdom and a well-lived life is better. Because of this, my Old Testament professor said that Qohelet really means grumpy old man. And since then, whenever I read this book, I hear it in Jack Lemmon and Walter Matthau's voices. In today's selection, Qohelet is speaking about vanities, how everything is vanity. To better understand this, I looked up the Hebrew word and found that the word translated as vanity also means something without substance, nothingness, and worthlessness. In these verses from Ecclesiastes, Qohelet is telling us that all the work we do just replaces the work of the past, and our work will be replaced by the next generation. That the things we make or gather will eventually be taken by someone else who did not toil for those things once we are gone. There is a similar theme in Jesus' lesson for us from Luke's Gospel. We skip ahead a chapter from last week, and this chapter is about the responsibilities and privileges of discipleship. A man requests that Jesus arbitrate a matter of inheritance, but Jesus sees this as something for the judges, not him. There is always a system in place, so he does not need to intervene. Jesus then pivots to address the basic cause that did concern him. That is the covetousness, the greed. This was not an ethical argument, but a familial one. Problems like this are solved at the deeper level. Jesus then challenges the accepted standard of values. Wealth does not equal happiness. Possessions, or the love of possessions, does not equal fulfillment. Security is not achieved by amassing property. That seems counterintuitive, doesn't it? Money can buy us things that make us happy, right? Owning property can give us a safe place to rest, right? However, Jesus addresses this by continuing with the parable of the rich fool. The wealthy farmer monologues about his earthly abundances. He has too much grain and no place to store it. First world problems. He tried to apply this to his spiritual life, but that is not how it works. Jesus reminds us that the earthly materials and things and riches offer us no protection against the uncertainty of life, and then they pass into the hands of others. It is like the meaningless vanities that the grumpy old man spoke about. Everyone collects things. Everyone collects things. Things that can make us happy. Things that keep us occupied. Things that thrill us through the search. Things that give us pride in displaying. Some people took their collecting to such a level that the first museums evolved from people displaying their own private collections. The wonder rooms and cabinets of curiosities. And we go and see them, and we are amazed and entertained by them. Like the Christmas house in Torrington, which this also displays the homeowner's collection of nutcrackers inside as well. But in the bigger picture of things, our own collections are just like the vanities that Qohelet speaks of, or the earthly possessions that Jesus speaks of. What we collect and put together cannot be taken with us, and so it goes away. Most of you know that I have a huge collection of books. That's not all. When you visit my study, you will find yourself surrounded by books, and that isn't even all of them in there. I found my happy place surrounded by books. However, I realized the same thing that Qohelet and Jesus preached, that someday my collection will be broken up and no longer be whole. And I may not even get a say in what happens to my library. What opened my eyes to this reality was a comparison of how my grandparents handled their collections. My mother told me about her mother's prized possessions. They were sets of china and crystal that she received as presents on her wedding day. But she never even unpacked them. She kept them safely boxed and stored, and she was the only person who ever looked at them. And when she made out her will, she asked my mom and her sisters who wanted to inherit what pieces out of her will, out of her beloved collection. But she was shocked to find that her daughters did not care about it. They knew about the collection and what it meant to her, but they did not share that connection. They did not use them for Sunday dinner or special occasions. The collection stayed in the basement in boxes, collecting dust. They never even saw the pieces. They only heard about them. On the other hand, my mother's father collected coins. Whenever my brother and I visited them, he would show us his coins and show us any new additions. We got to touch the coins and hear him tell stories about the coins, where they were from, and how he found them. He also taught us how to quickly identify valuable coins. And all this happened a couple yards from where my grandmother stored her beloved china and crystal. While I am not a coin collector, I remember what he taught me. So whenever I handled money, I would catch silver quarters, pre-1964 nickels, and that sort of thing. When he passed, each of us of the grandkids inherited a portion of his collection. And the value I get from it is from the memories. And now I proudly display my portion of his collection in a hutch in the parsonage. In both cases, a collection was divided, portioned, and sent in different directions. The collections do not exist as they once did. With the case of my grandmother's collection, there was no connection to anyone else, and so no one really cared about it. With my grandfather's, he shared his joy of the collection, and while his collection was divided, it is held by those who cherish the memories connected with it. I hope that I will follow my grandfather's example in how I handle my earthly possessions, and that when my time comes, someone will feel the same way about my books as I do about my grandfather's coins. Because in the end, it's just vanity. So we should do things in a wise way that will have meaning, as the grumpy old man said. True security in this life is found with God, and God's gift of the Spirit for us, and God's love for us. Nothing, not life nor death, not things present nor future, not anything in all of creation, can separate us from the love of God we find in Jesus. That is true security, not in the collection of things. Please join me in the spirit of prayer. God of enduring love, when we find ourselves surrounded by too much stuff, when we want more and more to satisfy us, draw our hearts to you. Direct our hearts away from covetousness and guide us to handle our earthly possessions in a way that shares our joys with our loved ones. Amen. Thank you for watching this video of an archived sermon, and I hope you enjoyed.